Darian DeVries had plenty of success in his first and only season at West Virginia. Can that success carry over to Bloomington and the Indiana Hoosiers?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Andy Patton, today on a special crossover edition of Locked On College Basketball, as I am joined by Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers. We're going to talk all things Indiana basketball today. Again, you're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. This is part of our series where we are doing team previews. We talked UConn with Leaf to Lean on Wednesday, now talking Indiana hoops with Jacob Goins. Check out the full conversation here coming up in just a second.
Welcome in. It is a Locked On crossover edition. I'm Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers. I bring in my man Andy Patton of Locked On College Basketball, an expert around the sport of the greatest sport on earth, in college basketball. And man, it's been so long since you and I have had a chance to discuss, and it's a perfect time. I know football's on a lot of people's minds, but man, basketball seems to always be going on. Indiana's in their summer workouts. They're getting ready for a trip over to Puerto Rico, and there's so much to discuss about a new era of Indiana basketball. I've just got to get your initial thoughts on what your takeaways are, just kind of what you've seen from the outside looking in on all the changes happening here in Bloomington.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on, man. I love talking about all college basketball teams. It's always fun to talk Indiana. And, I think initial thoughts are when Indiana didn't fire Mike Woodson prior to last season, I was a little worried that they were going to miss the boat on some really high-profile coaches. There were some guys that I thought they maybe could have landed that they missed out on because they kept Woodson for that extra year. And yet, if I'd known at that time that Darian DeVries would have only lasted 1 year at West Virginia before taking this job, I think I would have felt a lot better about it, because that's a phenomenal hire. And I still think Indiana probably could have ended the Woodson era a year earlier, but I think it worked out in a way that's going to be really advantageous for this team. Darian DeVries is a phenomenal coach. We saw that from his brief time at West Virginia, helps turn that program around. And I know they didn't quite make the NCAA tournament or didn't quite have the season that they looked like they were going to have early in the year, but they picked up some really marquee wins early in the season. They beat a very good Gonzaga team. They beat some other great teams in the non-conference. And when they got into conference play and stumbled a bit, it was due to Darren's son, Tucker Devries, who obviously I'm quite sure we'll talk about, getting injured. And that was a huge factor for them. If he's healthy, if the rest of this roster that they put together is healthy, I really like Coach Devries. And I think this was a great home run hire for Indiana, somebody who hopefully is going to be around for quite a while and help build this program back into a powerhouse in the Big Ten. I don't think they could have done a whole lot better on the coaching search, especially considering the timing, at least in my mind, was something I was a little worried about for them.
Well, I love to hear that, because there were so many mixed emotions and mixed feelings about when the hire was made. And my goodness, the coaching search itself and the carousel that it was. I mean, it was wild, man. I know you covered it, Andy. I mean, it went from Mick Cronin out west to Buzz Williams to Bruce Pearl to Nate Oates to Jay Wright. I mean, the biggest names in the sport were all floating around for this Indiana job. And then all of a sudden felt like overnight, it was boom, Darian DeVries, West Virginia, boom, he's gone. West Virginia fans are still mad. Our buddy Mountaineer Paul is still not happy about Darian DeVries and the way that he left West Virginia, but now he's here in Bloomington. And later on in the show, we're going to talk about what to expect on the recruiting trail from DeVries, I guess what we've already seen, and also what to expect on the floor. But it's a brand new head coach, Andy, and a brand new roster. There are 0 returning players from a year ago, with the news that we learned about Anthony Leal and Luke Goody, who tried to get a waiver through the NCAA. We know what miserable process that is, and they were declined. And so brand new coach, brand new roster, and hopefully a brand new Indiana team.
Yeah, it's hard to not like the way that this roster has come together, considering the circumstances. I mean, in the modern era of college basketball, anytime you turn over your coach, you're probably going to turn over very close to your entire roster. Sure. And what really surprisingly stands out to me is that it's most of the time when you turn over a coach and you turn over an entire roster, you at least bring 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 or more guys from that previous team over to your new team. And so you're like, okay, well, I know what this is going to look like because 5 of the guys on my team all played together last year under this head coach. You look at Iowa, they brought a handful of guys from Drake over to that program with Coach McCollum. And I'm sure there's many other examples. I know Nico Medved brought a few guys from Colorado State to Minnesota. And yet you look at this Indiana roster, 10 transfers coming in, but only one following Darian DeVries, and it's his son. And it's the player you want out of that group. Tucker's an outstanding player. He's not just a coach's kid. When he's healthy, he's a potential All-American candidate, at least an All Big Ten candidate. But it was a little surprising that there weren't more West Virginia people coming over. But ultimately, I really like the pieces that this team has brought in. They got some guys who have some serious experience. They got some national championship experience. They got some mid-major guys who I think are really going to thrive in Coach DeVries' system. Like, it's going to be tough to get all the pieces to fit together. And that's why I think you would have maybe liked to see, 3 or 4 guys who at least have played together before for a little bit of continuity. But I think DeVries he's got his work cut out for him to get this roster to kind of gel together, but talent's not an issue.
No, and that's what I've been trying to tell people, whether it's on Locked On Hoosiers or other shows that I'm going on or just out in conversation. It's like there are so many people that are not picking this Indiana team that are kind of hesitant because there's so many new players. But man, talent, you're right. Talent is not the problem. It's just whether they all come together and they all gel. And I've been also trying to tell people too, and this is for some of your audience, it's like this team's going to look so different than it did last year. We're going to talk about why Mike Woodson just didn't work on this team, on his program, and kind of what the schedule looks like here in just a moment. But it's going to be a new team, man. They're going to be hard-nosed defense. They want to get up and down the floor. One of the comments that DeVries made that I loved when he was hired was, we want to score in the first 12 to 13 seconds of the shot clock. They get up and down. They don't want to play this 20, 25 second half court offense and just dump it down low and let the big man go to work. We're not worried about that. DeVries, get up and down, score a bunch of points, and play hard-nosed defense. And from some of the videos, and when you look at the size of this team, Andy, it's impossible for them not to do that.
Yeah, I think, having watched this team a handful of times last year, like, I didn't have super high expectations for West Virginia coming into the season. DeVries he obviously had a lot of success at Drake, but it kind of felt like, it's maybe going to be a multi-year process for them. And did actually a crossover on I also host Locked On Zags, and Gonzaga played West Virginia early in the year. And I did a crossover with our good buddy Mountaineer Paul, and I kind of said I think it'd be pretty unlikely for West Virginia to be able to pull off the win, and they did. They pulled off a great upset. And one of the things they were able to do, a lot of teams don't try to run with Gonzaga because they play such a fast-paced offense, and West Virginia wasn't really afraid of doing that. They certainly didn't constantly try to run the entire game, but they really did try to wear out Gonzaga in a way that most teams try and fail to do that, and this West Virginia team was able to do it. And I think it told us a couple things about Coach DeVries. He's not afraid. He's not afraid of the competition. He's not afraid to he's not going to be somebody who doesn't play his style because he's afraid it's not going to work against the team he's playing. It doesn't matter who he's playing. He's going to go out. He's going to play his style of ball. He's going to get his types of players that he thinks fits that system. And yeah, there may be some growing pains early in the year simply because these guys have not played together. But I can promise Indiana fans that they're going to know what identity they want to play with on the floor. If guys aren't matching that identity, it won't be because they're unsure what to do. Coach DeVries will establish what he wants to do and what type of team he wants to have. And if he has guys on this roster that don't fit that style, he'll replace them with guys that do. And maybe it takes 2 years, maybe it doesn't, maybe it happens this year, but eventually when he has a roster full of guys who fully buy into what style he wants to play, this team is going to be dangerous year in and year out.
It's talented, it's fast, and Darian DeVries is going to be a lot of fun. And there's so much talent on this team, and it's all brand new because the coach got fired last year. Well, fired, let go, walked away, whatever language they want to use. We'll talk about why Mike Woodson didn't work and what Darian DeVries can do to combat that. We'll talk about that next here on a Locked On crossover of Hoosiers and college basketball.
But first, folks, when I'm on top of my hydration, I notice everything works better. My energy's better, my mood, my focus, even my skin looks better. But getting enough fluids every day, it's not always easy. And that's why I've been loving Drip Drop. Drip Drop is doctor developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. My go-to flavor is black cherry. It's a game changer after a workout or on those extra busy days. Drip Drop has become my go-to, especially during long summer days or when I know I'll be sweating it out. It saved me more than once from that midday crash. Right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard.
All right, we continue with a Locked On crossover, Hoosiers and college basketball. I'm Jacob Goins. He is Andy Patton. And I don't want to harp on the past too much, but it's hard not to talk about a guy who is an Indiana legend. He was beloved by Bob Knight as a player. And at the time, Andy, you could speak to this as well. It made sense to hire Mike Woodson at Indiana. This was the golden boy. He was coming home out of the NBA. Everything made sense about the Mike Woodson hire, but my goodness, was that a long 3 years, and it just did not work.
Yeah, it felt like Coach Woodson was too slow to make adjustments to the things that were and were not working. Mostly were not working for this team. I mean, if he'd come out and just been horrendous right out of the gate, I wonder if he would have been more receptive to making changes. I mean, his first year, they were not great. They were 21-14, but that was 9 more wins than they'd had the previous year. Granted, that was a shortened season, but they were fine. They were fine their first year, and it kind of felt like, oh, maybe I think they were good enough early in Woodson's tenure that they kind of felt like, well, we can just keep doing this. We get our guys in, and things are going to turn around. And by year 2, it was like, okay, they're better. By year 3, it started to feel like, all right, when is the progress going to happen? Like, when are we going to start to see this team really develop and that kind of culture get built? And, so often NBA guys, I mean, we've talked about, it's a common thread to talk about college coaches who go to the NBA and do not succeed. Rick Pitino, John Calipari. I mean, it's such a common thread. We don't often talk about NBA coaches coming back to college because there's not that many of them that do it, but there are success stories. Kelvin Sampson at Houston is probably the most notable current example of a coach who's been prolific at the college level after not succeeding in the NBA. But I think folks just felt like exactly what you laid out. He's a legend. Bobby Knight loves him. He bleeds, red. He loves this program, and he has pedigree as an NBA coach. This should work. And I just felt like he never was willing to make the adjustments that were necessary, whether it was recruiting to his style, whether it was adjusting in season, whether it was adjusting out of season, just the style of play. They played guys at positions that I thought never really made sense for them. And it was frustrating to watch a program where, like, going into the season, like Isaac and I on college basketball, it felt like we could identify what issues were going to happen for Indiana. And then those issues happened. And I know we're not alone. Yeah. I know there's many fans who felt the same way. And like, I'd like to think I know a decent amount about basketball, but if I can foresee the problems for your team and they happen basically exactly how I saw them happening, that's a sign of some issues going on in the coaching room, because they should have been able to tell what was going to happen there. And I think you saw it last year early in the season where it was just like, okay, it's pretty clearly time to pull the plug. And even when they went on a run later in the year and got really close and arguably should have made the tournament, or at least, we're right in that conversation, it was past the time where it was ready to move on.
Well, I can tell you what the problems were. It's the fact that Indiana was one of the highest shooting teams from the 2-point from the 2-point area, right, but they were one of the worst teams from shooting in the 3-point area. I mean, this was a team that would score 60 points a game, and 55 of them came inside the painted area. I mean, it was great when that worked and when they were able to bully and outsize only a couple of teams in the Big Ten. I mean, I know you guys talk about the Big Ten quite a bit. It's about size and big dudes down low. But when you get behind early and you're down by 10, 15, 20 points for a team that can't shoot the 3 ball, you don't really come back all that often. And so that seemed to be so many issues with that team. And you're right, man. It was like, yeah, there's an issue here, here, and here. Let's see how they fix it. And they just never did. And I think a lot of that was a talent problem, was a talent issue for the lack of recruiting from Mike Woodson, which we're going to talk about some more with Darian DeVries in particular in our final segment. But when you look at the roster now that Indiana has in comparison to last year, what is it that sticks out to you? Because Indiana fans were happy with the transfer portal haul. You have one kid coming in through high school. I want to talk to you about international basketball in a moment as well. But when you look at this roster in comparison to last year, what is it that stands out about you or to you about this Indiana team?
Well, they don't have a bunch of big hulking players who are going to take up space down low. And it's not a shot at Umar Ballo. It's not that he's a bad basketball player, but when the team already had Malik Renault and Mackenzie Mbako on the roster last year, bringing in Umar Ballo was just a very obvious move that was going to clog things up down low and prevent this team from being able to space the floor adequately. And it shut down driving lanes and really hampered the ability of guys like Rice and Carlisle to get downhill. And those guys were not great three-point shooters. So when you take away your driving lanes for your guards who are not floor spacers, you end up with a team that settles for a lot of long twos, and that's what we saw last year. This roster, they don't have that. They don't have a ton of size, which honestly is not necessarily a bad thing because of how Coach DeVries wants to play, but it could be a factor for them again in certain matchups for sure. But like their biggest player that's coming in, as far as I know, is Reed Bailey. He's 6'10", but he's not big. He's certainly not built like Ballo. He's more of a floor spacer in a lot of ways. He's a very effective three-point shooter, albeit on a small sample size, but you don't have a roster that's going to have nearly the same issues. There may be other issues that crop up with this team, but I look at this team and seeing their ability to space the floor, their ability to play inside and outside. They have more defensive versatility than previous rosters do. And, they don't have a blue chip type prospect the way Mbako was necessarily, but they got a good freshman coming in, a 4-star kid in Trent Sisley, coming from a big basketball factory in Montverde. And I think that this is a roster that, again, is built more around like the mid-major transfers and guys who've had a lot of success in college basketball, but who many of them have not played at a super high level. I mean, Nick Dorn's a great scorer coming over from Elon. We mentioned Reed Bailey coming over from Davidson. Connor Enright's a veteran guard from DePaul. Like, you got guys coming in who I think are going to fill solid roles, and you may not have the star power outside of DeVries, but I think that this roster is more built to succeed in the modern college basketball game, whereas Woodson's rosters were built to succeed in honestly what looked like early 2000s NBA, and it just was not going to work in the modern Big Ten.
I'll tell you a guy that I'm most excited about before we move on. Tucker Devries, yes, and people should be excited about him. And I know there's some controversy and drama about his time at West Virginia, but Lamar Wilkerson is the guy that I'm just super pumped about from Sam Houston. I mean, you're talking about a guy who was a top 20 scorer in the country last year. He could shoot, he could get downhill. He's a flashy player. He's an exciting player. I mean, Indiana's been missing that type of guard. I mean, you just haven't had that in recent memory. And even when Trey Galloway was at his peak, I mean, he wasn't to what Lamar Wilkerson is, and they're built differently and play different styles of basketball. So that's the one that I think is going to make this team go. Between Wilkerson, Tucker DeVries, you've got Reed Bailey, and then you're just kind of filling in with other guys around there. Is there concern that a lot of these guys are mid-major and a lot of them aren't Power 5 guys? Or do you think that they're all solid from where they came from and can kind of take that next step up?
I think it's, yes, a little bit of a concern there. I don't think it's a significant concern, mostly because I think they're going to fill roles and excel in the spaces that they're supposed to excel.
Sure.
There's 3 guys on this roster, and maybe more, 3 guys just from the brief amount that I looked, that averaged over 7 3-point attempts per game last year. One of them is Wilkerson. Obviously, he's going to fill a bigger role than just a 3-point shooter. I think Nick Dorn's probably going to fill a bigger role than that too. But like a Josiah Miles coming over from North Florida, like that's not a great program. It's not a super competitive conference. He averaged 15 points per game. He was not an elite 3-point shooter, but he did take over 7 of them per game. If you put him in a role where you're basically asking him, hey, float to the perimeter, have your feet set, have your hands up, you catch the ball, you launch a 3. I think that's the guy who shoots much better than 33%, because he was probably launching a bunch of contested threes on a team where he was the best player by a considerable amount. So DeVries is the kind of coach who I think can identify that and who can find that. And it's funny, when you look at programs that consistently bring in like mid-major transfers who don't do very well, a lot of fans and people want to say, oh, well, he just wasn't ready for the level and whatever. But usually it's a coaching issue. If programs, and I'll use Gonzaga as an example because they've been very good at this. Like if you bring in players from the transfer portal from smaller schools and they thrive in your system and that consistently happens, maybe it's a scouting thing. Maybe the coaching staff is a little better at that. But I think it's also just really being able to identify, this is the role we want you to fill. And we don't care that you were not good at this, or you weren't good at defense, or you're going to be struggling with the athleticism at this level. Like, we want you to do this. And I think if DeVries is identifying certain guys of like, hey, you're a shooter, you're a defensive stopper coming off the bench, right, whatever it may be, then the mid-major level of it all doesn't really matter to me. It's just a factor of are you willing to adjust from a role where you took 12 and a half shots per game like Miles did to a role where you're probably going to take a third of that many shots per game. And if you're not ready to do that, this is probably not the spot for you. And as long as DeVries had those conversations and guys buy in, I think that's going to set them up well this year.
Well, that all feeds into our final topic of conversation here in a Locked On crossover of Hoosiers and college basketball, because what should we expect? What are we expecting for Darian DeVries in year one, on the floor and off the floor as well? We talk about that in our final segment right here on a Locked On crossover. All right, final segment, Hoosiers and college basketball. He is Andy Patton. I'm Jacob Goins. We appreciate you being with us and joining us for an episode here today. And what should we expect, Andy? It's year one, right? Indiana missed the tournament last year. That's something that historically is just not acceptable here in Bloomington, as you know. Mm-hmm. Year one, new coach, new team. What are the expectations for all the things that you've laid out so masterfully here about the style that DeVries uses and the team that the roster that this team has? What are realistic expectations for Indiana in 25 and 26 in year one under Darian DeVries?
Yeah, I think one thing I like about the way that this team has come together, not just from a roster perspective, but I like that their schedule has some challenging early non-conference games. I think that's a good thing to put your team through. And I think it's almost a little counterintuitive. A lot of people think, we have a new roster and we have we're set up in a way where we may struggle early in the year. So let's kind of pad our schedule with some of those easier games to put ourselves in a position where we can maybe gel a little bit and get together. And I think that there's obviously something to that, but every team is going to play 5 or 6 of those bye games per year, every power conference team. And so you're going to get those opportunities, but I don't think it's necessarily advantageous to play 4 bye games in a row and then not have your first challenging game until late November. We've seen teams do that. I will pick on UConn because that's what they did last year. And then they lost their first 3 challenging games, and it really kind of hamstrung them the rest of the season. I look at Indiana, they're playing Marquette in their second game of the season. They're playing Kansas State pretty early in the year. I don't know if Kansas State's going to be a great team, but like they're a decent team that has some talent. So I think that this team is in a position they may take some early season losses. They may lose to Marquette. That's a really good team that does not have any continuity issues because they never utilized the transfer portal. So Marquette is pretty much the same roster it always is. But I don't think it's a bad thing if Indiana loses to Marquette. If they get smoked, that's a different conversation. But if they play competitively and lose, you learn from that and you get better, and that makes them better when they get into conference play. Ultimately, to give a more firm answer to your question, I think Indiana will have a solid non-conference. I think they will get better as the year goes on. And assuming that DeVries is healthy throughout the season, I think that this Indiana team will be competitive throughout Big Ten play. I think there's, still going to be 5 or so teams that finish ahead of them. Purdue, both Michigans are going to be tough. Once again, UCLA is honestly a team I'm not as high on as many others, but they are still the talent rich. And I think that they're going to be solid. Oregon's going to be solid. But I think Indiana at their peak can be in that conversation and be a team that puts themselves comfortably inside the field. Having said that, the pieces have to come together. It's much harder to project a team where they don't have any of that roster continuity. And they'll get those opportunities. You mentioned they're going to Puerto Rico. Like, they're going to get some chances to play together. That's something that Baylor did last month in the World University Games, which was really smart because Baylor, like Indiana, did not have any players returning from last season. So it's smart to see these coaches recognizing that and finding opportunities to get their team some cohesion. I think Indiana makes the tournament. I think Indiana makes the tournament. I think that I don't think it's going to be like a top 5 seed. I think that they may, unfortunately, it so often happens. It feels like every year there's 2 or 3 Big Ten teams that end up in that 8-9 kind of just spot that nobody wants to be. I wouldn't be stunned if Indiana's in that mix. I wouldn't be stunned if they're a 10 seed or even a bubble, but I could also see things going well enough for DeVries' team that they're a 6 seed or a 7 seed. Like, I think that any higher than that is probably on the very high end of what I would think is realistic for this team, but somewhere in the 6 to 9 seed range feels plausible for this team. And I think certainly anybody would be happy with that after what happened in Woodson's final couple of years in Bloomington. I have to imagine that would be a pretty good result for this team under DeVries.
Yeah, I think we would take anything that you just laid out. Would be totally fine. You heard it here, folks. Heard it here first, folks. Andy Patton claims that Indiana is last year's Kentucky with Mark Pope, making a run at the Sweet 16. The team's going to just get hot down the stretch, and nobody's going to be able to stop them. That's what I'm taking away from this conversation. That's what I'm hearing. Before we let you get out of here, I know we got to wrap up here. In terms of recruiting, right? We talked about why Mike Woodson failed. That was a big one because he did not recruit at the highest level. So many in-state kids and surrounding state kids went anywhere else other than the Hoosiers. We were always there, top 5s, top 10s, top 2s, but they always went somewhere else. In terms of DeVries as a recruiter, we saw it a little bit in the portal. We've seen him be on the trail hardcore here early. What does he have to do to get the Hoosiers back in the national landscape of recruiting with some of these big-time kids?
What's interesting about it right now is that for the entire history, really, of college basketball, your ability as a recruiter individually was the most important thing. Can you sell a kid on your program, on your style, on your facilities, on them staying home if it's a hometown kid, on them having a legacy, et cetera, et cetera? Now, there are additional factors to that. Obviously, your amount of money that you're able to spend legally via the House settlement and how Indiana, DeVries will have to advocate for a large chunk of the money from the House settlement, that $20.5 million. And with Indiana's football team having some success last year, I'm interested how that might go for them and what their ability to have that money is. And then from there, can you get the NIL deals, the third-party NIL deals? Can you get these kids some dough, because that is going to matter. And it's the reason that, right now, the 2026 class, where I know Indiana's involved in a lot of high profile recruiting, we haven't seen a lot of commitments from that entire class because all these kids watch their buddies who were a year earlier than them get millions and millions of dollars in NIL money because last year teams were just spending whatever the heck they wanted. And now that they can't do that, these kids are like, wait, my teammate was not as good as me and he got 2 million and I'm only getting offered 400,000. Like, what's going on? So I think it's an interesting time right now. And I think for Indiana, it's not just what can DeVries do? Like, what can he do with the resources that he has is kind of the more important question. And the fact that he succeeded at a school like Drake makes me feel even more confident. Not that I think Indiana is like resource poor or anything like that. They're obviously not. But I think the fact that DeVries has proven he can succeed even when maybe he doesn't have the same opportunities that certainly like a Kentucky or somebody like that might have, is I think a promising sign, because if Indiana does back him, if he does have a little bit of success and some boosters start coming around and he starts having the kind of money that like Pat Kelsey got in his first year at Louisville or that Mark Pope got, like you said, at Kentucky, if he's able to throw that kind of money around, he can have that kind of success. Louisville's projected to be a top 10 team in the country in Pat Kelsey's second year. And I think that the expectation for Kelsey in his first year was kind of vaguely similar to what we're talking about with Indiana. They exceeded those expectations, got robbed of getting a higher seed. They should have been higher than in the 8 seed. And then now he's looked at as a top 10 team. I would not be surprised, honestly, if DeVries has a similar path, especially if he proves enough on the recruiting trail, gets a few big name guys or gets a few big name commitments, and then that money starts flowing through. And then all of a sudden you're in really good shape going forward.
It's a new era in Bloomington with head coach Darian DeVries, a new roster, new team, new staff, new everything. And you got a full rundown right there from my man, Andy Patton. He is the co-host of Locked On College Basketball. They do an incredible job. Him and Isaac Shade. Be sure you check that out. I'm your man, Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers. You can check me out every day as well for more Indiana basketball, football, sports insights as well. And until next time, to all college basketball fans, stay safe, and we'll talk to you later.